Hello, everyone. Today we are here with Rebekah from Canada. So I was lucky enough to stay on her house due to a program that we both participate, the Friendship Force International. So it was an amazing time, and she's here today to tell us a little bit about her country, her experience. So thank you so much, Rebekah, for being here with us today.
My pleasure. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. So good. So, Rebekah, you have lived all your life, born and raised in Canada in a very specific area, right? Could you tell us a little bit about where you were born? What are the main characteristics of this place you're from, and your experience there in this part of Canada? You are in the province of Ontario, right?
Yes, and Ontario is in the center of Canada. It is the largest province with population, not the biggest in size. And I have lived most of my life in an urban setting. I went to university in the capital of Canada, which is Ottawa. And Ottawa is a beautiful city. It's not huge, but it has all the things you need in a big city. But you can also easily get out. They have bicycle paths and a beautiful canal that goes through it. So it's there's many park areas. So I loved Ottawa. I was there 4 years while I was a student. And then I moved to Toronto. And Toronto, I looked it up, currently a population of 3 million. And I know you visited Toronto when you were in Canada. A very vibrant city, a very lived-in city. People and families live in the downtown. There are many different neighborhoods with different feelings and flavors, and sometimes different cultures. I lived right in the downtown. I lived farther out. And I would love to live in Toronto again. It has many festivals and shows, and but it's a very I always felt safe living there. Of course, any city, has problems, but Toronto is such a vibrant city. Right on Lake Ontario.
Your son is living there, right? In the area, at least.
Our son lives right in the heart of the city. So that's right. We have a chance to go in and visit him, which we always take advantage of. And then we raised our children in a city in the Greater Toronto area, north of Toronto, and it's called Brampton. And it had about 400,000 people, a very busy city. In the 25 years we lived there, it really expanded with population, but a very multicultural city, as is Toronto. But Brampton, our neighbors on either side were different faiths, different cultural backgrounds. I always I thought it was a good place to raise our kids, because they went to school with and made friends with children and kids of different cultures. And Brampton also was very good at having a lot of recreation facilities. So arenas and swimming pools and soccer fields, football fields, and many green areas and parks. So my husband, Sean, worked for the city of Brampton, and he's a landscape architect. So they were very good at making sure that trees were always planted and gardens. And So we had good years in Brampton. And then we decided to move out of the city and to live in the country. We have been living for 5 years now in an area called Halliburton.
I just didn't remember. Sorry, it was only 5 years you were there. Interesting.
Yes, we moved in 2017.
I see.
And we live in the country. We live beside a lake, so our house is on a property at the water. And Chego, you will remember all the lakes. Every time you drive, you have to go around the lake, and there are 600 lakes in our county, which is about 4,000 square kilometers. So many, many lakes. And I think when people come to Canada, of course, you want to see the big cities, Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver. But if you do get the chance, like you did, Chego, I would encourage you to leave the cities and go into the countryside, because so much of Canada is beautiful wilderness. And where we live, every day we see the beauty of the trees, lakes, rocks, rivers, and that is really so much of what Canada is. And to really get a flavor for Canada, I think it would be good to see both that as well as the beautiful cities that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just remembering all the stories you told me about the lakes getting all frozen winter time, right? Because I mean, here we've got this hot weather in most part of Brazil. Of course, in the south we have a little bit of cold in winter time, but we're pretty much different. So in Canada, at least in your area, is very cold. You've got a rigorous winter, but also a very warm summer. So tell me a little bit about some of the things the tourists or anyone that wants to visit more into Canada, into this wilderness of Canada. What could they do? What are the main activities they could enjoy doing there? The same that I did when, I think it was, I don't remember the season it was, but I was lucky enough to stay in your house. We were doing lots of things throughout the city, right? You call it the county, right? Of Halliburton.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember all these water sports with the boat and kayaking. It was so nice, but at the same time, it's very different in winter time, right? It changes a lot. Can you give us some of the highlights, the hot spots we could do? Because and by the way, I want to go back in winter time. I know it's going to be completely different anyways.
You should, because unless you live maybe in Vancouver or British Columbia, you are going, if you're in Canada in winter, you're going to have snow and cold. And where I live, the snow comes end of November and it stays on the ground until April. And the only way that you do well is to you have to go out and enjoy winter. You can't stay in your house. And if you are dressed for it, and if you are active, you won't be cold. We love snowshoeing, because you put snowshoes on and anywhere you could walk, you can snowshoe. Every little town in Canada would have an arena. So Canadians love to skate. Canadian children grow up playing ice hockey. The families come to watch them. It's a very social thing.
Ice hockey.
Curling.
I really want to say that. Unfortunately, I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Curling is big, certainly in small towns in Canada. Sean curls every week.
Really? I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because again,
is he good
can
at
get
it?
out.
Is he like a pro or no? Just for fun? Okay.
No,
Okay.
but he's not in a competitive league. He just started. So,
okay.
but that's the secret. Canadian children will toboggan. They go sledding down in the cities, any park that has a hill. When you get a snow, you see the kids tobogganing down. That's the secret.
Wow.
You have to get out and skating. We enjoy. We can occasionally skate on our lake if the ice freezes without cracks, or just down the road they flood a little outdoor rink and you skate. So
Do you
there's
ice skate, by the
skiing.
way? Do you do it yourself?
I do ice skate, yes. And
Oh,
and with COVID, we had friends that we met every Wednesday evening at the outdoor rink because we could skate, and we brought, coffee with us, and so we could see people and still skate even though, with COVID going on, because we were
yeah, no.
outside. So yeah, lots of things to do in every season.
So you
But
would
winter
say,
is beautiful.
yeah. And I think you get the best of it, right? In this way, you get advantage of all the situation that for us it could be very inhospitable, right? In a way that is difficult doing things. But I think you Canadians gave it away to overturn this into your advantage, and using that to practice sports and doing things, socializing, right? They say that in many countries that have very cold temperatures, people tend to isolate themselves and not socializing. That's so bad. And I think it's the opposite in your case. You do everything in order to keep these connections through sports and social gatherings. So it's so nice. I was very fascinated by this part, and I really want to go back in a winter time just to see how it is. You were saying that the lakes get all frozen every winter, or not necessarily? Depends on the
Every
snow, right?
winter. Oh no, every winter here they will freeze, and so hard that you could drive a car out onto the ice and it would
I
not go through.
remember.
Very hard, frozen. Yes.
Very thick, right? How many like
Well, you only need about, it's surprising. It doesn't need to be really thick. It's
yeah.
just solid. Yeah. Yeah, you can actually go out and stand on it when it's not that thick, as long as it's frozen, all the way through. Yeah. My husband ice fishes. He drills a hole in the ice, and he has a little pop-up tent and a little heater and a chair, and he sits out on the ice and puts his special fishing rod in, and he doesn't catch much, but he enjoys being out there.
Where does Sean do that? Right in that lake in front
on
of
our
him?
lake, yeah, just outside.
That's
goes,
nice.
Yeah, goes out.
I really would do that someday. I love fish to fish our own fish. Yeah, for dinner. That would be great. Very nice. So, and you told me when I was there in Canada, and we have chatted a little bit about it. You have worked a lot with editing, right? So could you please tell us, you are retired now, is that it? But you worked as a freelance editor, right? So Rebekah, what are some of the types of materials you worked with? And could you give our listeners some nice tips about improving their writing skills? I think it's very important and very challenging. And this is something that for most of the ESL, English as a second language learners, is very hard writing, because you need to follow all that rules, grammar rules. So it's kind of crazy. So 2 questions in one. Tell us a little bit about your work, and how could you, give us some help in writing skills tips.
Sure. Well, I started working as a print journalist in the field of magazines, which I worked in all my career. But over time, I also had the opportunity to work in book publishing. So I edited books and worked with authors who had written books. I then took some training when everything moved online with the internet. and have edited material that's for the web. And each of those formats, each of those media are different and have a different, you have to edit in different ways. But there are some key tips that I would give anybody in terms of good writing. And the first thing is to keep it short. So short sentences, short paragraphs, and particularly for the web, less content is better than more. If you can say it in a few words, don't say it in many words. Particularly because all of us spend so much time reading online. And now we skim, we skip, we don't spend the time to read a very long, and if you write something very long, people are just gonna not read it. So keep it short, be clear. You don't have to use big, fancy, long words. It's better if you don't. So clear and simple and short. And finally, I would say, if you want to improve your English, your writing, you need to read English. And I know it's hard to read another language. So you may not be able to read books in English, but still read. And I don't mean read your English friends' news feeds, or you read material from that is well written. So perhaps some English language newspapers that are well known and respected, if you can read those online. The more you read English, the better you will be at writing it. So that's another tip I would give you.
That's an absolutely great tip. I tell my students that a lot, that you should read independently of your level, because nowadays we have so many things on the internet, right? For example, I always tell them to read audiobooks, and with the internet nowadays, they can practice both skills at the same time. They can do the reading and the listening. And something very nice is that they have some categories. So I can even find the correct book for each level. So there is no excuse anymore in this virtual world. You can just go there, find the correct book. And I always tell my students, read something you like. If you like the news, go for it. If you like cartoons or animes, whatever you like, just go for it, because then it's going to be pleasurable. If it's boring, you're just gonna drop it, and then it has the opposite effect. So you just go for the things that you really appreciate. And nowadays we have bazillions of things online, no? Literally. We have so much. And I know that you speak other language, but I will ask you anyway, which other language do you speak? And could you give us some tips about how you were able to develop this second language? What were your strategies? So for the many of the listeners that don't know, there in Canada, they have two official languages, right? English and French, because you have some provinces. So yeah, bring it on. You can explain everything for us, please.
Yeah, so in Canada, students in school have to learn French. So I took French throughout school, and I was interested in French. So I also took it for a year in university, but I am not fluent at all in French. But I have had the opportunity when traveling, for instance, in the province of Quebec, which is very French, which is all French speaking. And I've traveled in France, and I've had the opportunity to try my limited French. And what works for me is don't be afraid to try. I always feel you just have to try. Even if you're not saying it perfectly, they can still understand you. If someone is not a native Portuguese speaker and speaks to you, Chago, you would understand what they were saying, even though they got got it a bit wrong. So always try, and don't be afraid of that. And whenever you try, the first thing I always learn anywhere I'm going is some key phrases in a different language, because and then I start with that, and it's amazing how much you can communicate. The other the thing I always think about as well is, if you are listening to them speak, if I'm listening to a French speaker, and we recently traveled in Quebec and had this happen, and sometimes I don't understand every word they say, but I listen for key words. And so usually you can understand what they're saying if you can catch some of those key words. And I described it to my husband. Sometimes it sounds like blah, 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 and then you hear like a few words, blah, 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 and I know what they've asked. So listen for keywords, and that's my secret. And don't be embarrassed that you can't speak it well. Just speak it, and the more you do that, the better you will get. And then they will try, because often they have a bit of your language, and they also feel awkward. But if you're trying, and even if you're really bad, you're just trying, then they will try. And then between you can have a pretty good conversation.
It's very good to hear you saying that, because we Brazilians, we have this sensation, that, we need to be perfect. And it's so nice because you are a native English speaker, and you struggle. You have these strugglings like everyone else in speaking a second language, which is totally normal. And I'm so happy that you're saying about this. You should go and give it a try and focus on the context, right? I think that's it. That's about it. It's about the communication, the messages. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to understand all the words all together. Sometimes you're gonna miss something, and it's going to be just fine, right? Yeah, I think I'm very happy to hear that from you anyways. So now, still talking a little bit about Canada, I wanted to know a little bit about your opinion related to the fact that Canada receives lots of immigrants, right? Canada is a huge country, a continental country, is a very rich country, is the second biggest territory in Earth, but you have a small population compared to us, for example. So, and we have so many people that want to go to Canada for a better life, and perhaps you need that at some point, because you're gonna need some workforce, not only now, but for the future too. So what would you say to someone wanting to immigrate to Canada, and what sorts of jobs can these people find there in Canada? Yeah, and last but not least, how important is English, to speak a good English on that?
Yes, I mean, Canada relies on immigration. We wouldn't have a large enough population without immigration, so it's key for us. Currently, I would say you always hear about the need in Canada for skilled trades, so electricians, carpenters, builders. That's always in demand. Healthcare workers, and I know Canada is not alone, but nurses, personal support workers, very short supply. And there has been some change in my province of Ontario to do better at accepting qualifications of people in healthcare from other countries, because often immigrants to Canada find that their education and qualifications are not recognized, and they have to retrain or re-educate themselves, which is a reality. But there is, particularly in the field of healthcare, there are some changes because of the pandemic and the short staff to ease that. Lab technicians, again, right now are very high demand, and that is something that you can, in less than a year, if you came to Canada as an immigrant, you could, if you had English, you could train as a lab technician within a year and get a decent job. And of course, anything to do with computers, because that's a universal language, and you know, you're always welcomed if you have good computer skills. And as I said, English really is key. We're close friends with a Syrian family who came to Canada 7 years ago, and the wife had really no English. The husband had quite a bit, but the wife has worked very hard to learn English. She's currently studying to be a lab technician. All their children, they worked very hard to make sure they spoke English, and the family is doing very well. So speaking English is I can't overestimate how important that is for you to have a successful experience in Canada, and to get a good job, and also to really feel a part of the culture and not feel isolated wherever you are.
I see. Very, very great. And talking about all these very unique characteristics of Canada, because it's being formed by immigrants throughout its history, right? We can discuss a little bit, for example, about the civil rights and how liberal Canada has been throughout this year, all these years, right? For example, all the minorities and the GLBTQ plus communities. Can you tell us a little bit how were these rights achieved, and what was the process of Canada getting that liberal? And also on the top of it, which is also related to the minorities, what's your opinion about the Aborigines' claims for rights and recognition in Canada, Rebekah, please?
I did a little research on the LGBTQ, because I wasn't able really to find anything that could explain why Canada is liberal. I will give you my own personal theory,
yes, please,
in a minute. But I'm very proud of the fact that Canada is an inclusive country, culture, race, sexual orientation. 1969, homosexuality, what it was called then, was decriminalized. In 1995, so that's a long time ago, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which it's a key component of our human rights, recognized that you couldn't discriminate based on sexual orientation. And same-sex marriages have been since 2005. I don't know why. I wonder if it's possibly because we are quite secular in our public life. In other words, our religion and our state are quite separate. Unlike, for instance, the United States, where there is a very large segment of Christianity that has a lot of influence politically, and there's I think that's a factor. Whereas in Canada, we just don't, we really keep those things separate. They don't tend to influence, and sometimes, unfortunately, some of the negative repression, particularly around LGBTQ, comes from a very from a certain brand of Christianity. And in Canada, that's not the case. We keep. So that's my own personal theory. I don't know if it's true, but I think I'm very proud of our country as being one that does respect people's cultures and encourages people to be who they are. Not that we don't have issues of racism and homophobia, of course we do.
It's everywhere, right, Rebekah?
It's everywhere, but certainly we are quite socially progressive in terms of legislation, and I am proud of that. I think with Indigenous rights, I am glad to see that we are hopefully at a time of reconciliation. I think that the past was, Canada did horrific things, injustices to Indigenous people.
Not just Canada, USA too, and all America.
Well, all
right?
around the world.
All America.
All around
down
the
here
world.
was the same. Yeah.
And children were taken from their parents and put in residential schools, and beaten and sexually abused, and the lasting impact of that you can't overestimate. But so I'm happy to see that we are trying to make reparations. I think Indigenous people are incredibly patient because it's been so long. They have worse education, worse economically currently. And so we have a long way to go, but I'm hopeful we are at a time when Canadians are realizing the terrible legacy that we need to, make up for now.
And I think some of this reconciliation is just about recognizing what's being done and trying to talk to them and respect them and listen to them, right? I think giving them voice, I think, is the first thing. And you have done that already in Canada, right? Somewhat. And from that point on, we just need to work hard in order to bring a more humanized society, right? Where everybody has a right to live in peace and the way they are, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Rebekah, I can't put in words how happy I am to have you here today. It's been a great talk. I'm so happy, really, seeing you after 2 years, after the pandemic time. I'm happy that you and your family are doing great. And looking forward to see you here in Brazil. You're more than welcome. You need to come down here to get to know our country. You're more than welcome. And thank you so very much for this talk today. Hope to see you soon and take care.
My pleasure. All the best. Bye now.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, Rebekah. See you.